And I think there's a transcript. All right, so it's great to see that we have Mengyi's son today. He was a student of the summer school last year, and he is now a postdoc. Well, he did his PhD in Michigan, and now he's a postdoc with Amaral at Northwestern University. So I'm very excited to and looking forward to hearing your talk, Meng. Please go ahead.
Okay, cool. So let me see if I can share the screen. Should be this one. Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
So we use the microgrant. We start to explore an interesting topics, namely how scientists should change their research topic if they want. So the project still, we are pretty much figure out the prototypes of the codes of how to explore it, including some codes and the way that we should collaborate between different authors. But the result at the moment is tentative, and it's not guaranteed that as it evolves, you will always come back to the same conclusion. So just bear with it. To start that, I really want to motivate why I want to study how scientists change topics by an examples. Probably this will be familiar for Daniel and maybe Stephen also, because they're neuron scientists, Seymour Benzer, and he is one of the greatest scientists in the molecular biology and also in neuroscience, and he's a very interesting person. So he started as a physicist, and so this is a point that is describing his career. So physics is fun, but I don't care. I am on to something else the next year. I must stick with the new frontier until I am old and gray. So he started as a physicist. He started a semiconductor, and actually his work paved the way for John Barlin or whoever later get a Nobel Prize. So he has seminal contribution in physics. And then he moved to molecular biology, studying the phage. Okay, genetics was fun, but I don't care. I'm on to something else next year. I must stick with the new frontier until I am old and gray. Same phrase. And at the end, he also got some word that as the Nobel Prize level, although the Nobel Prize never give to him, shame on the Nobel Prize committee. And he make his last move, probably not the last, because if he can live longer, he probably would make another move. He's basically saying, move to the behavior, and single-handedly found the field of behavior genetics in my standards. So behavior was fun, but I don't care. I am onto something else next year. I must stick with the new frontier until I am old and gray. The way he do science is basically veni, vidi, vici. I come, I see, and I conquer. Now, these are very inspiring examples, but let me tell you, if you really look at the large-scale data, there's not that much Seymour Benzer. Most of people, when they try to switch topic, is always a struggles. We have some quite good evidence and from different type of measures of this is the behavior, what we call pivoting, change your research topics every once for a while. So there's a Nature Communication paper looking at how scientists switching topic, they build their career and look at how the topic changes along their career. And the basic conclusion is like, if you change your topics, you usually suffer. So your career, your performance will dip a little bit. More recently, there's a well-calibrated paper by Ryan Yu and Dashun Wang, Ben Jones et al., and they're looking at pivoting angles. And the conclusion is basically as you're pivoting from your backgrounds, you choose to venture into new field, you typically suffers. And these patterns, so I don't like the result, honestly, because I personally starting from a biologist and moving to science of science field, I am pivoting. So, but this result, we see that over and over again in a lot of studies. And later, when I really look at the data, I see the same patterns. So it's really something like to do that. So from my perspective, I'm going to ask if I would like to switch, if I really have the demand to switch, how should I do it? So that's the motivation of the project. There are also some other evidence that are not exactly the same, but kind of interesting to put into context. One is like looking at how so both paper are looking at how you build your own research topic. The basic conclusion is you should do different things from your PhD advisors. So from other angles, it looks like the pivoting is sometimes necessary. So that's why we make the title Making the Tough Shot. You might need to do some tough thing in order to achieve that. So this is how we usually calculate the pivoting angle, based how you measure how similar what you are doing now versus what you are doing parts. Basically, you pick a paper that you publish, a focal paper, and you compare the journal as a proxy for fields, what you cite and that distribution, and do the cosine similarity with your parse research, usually a time windows like 3 to 5 years, and see how large that pivoting angle is. And this is the calculation that we are going to use throughout our phase. The research plan as initial design, which later evolved to be very different, is like we are going to identify the topic switches from MAG database or a lot of bibliometric database based on the pivoting angles. And then we kind of like looking at how they fare afterwards. And there should still be some success, right? So even though for an average is bad, but maybe there are some outliers that do well. And we want to know why they do well. And then we try to couple that with their other characteristics like the author level, institution levels, or what type of topics they venture into. That's a very rough idea, and try to see if we can find some patterns. And after some exploration, maybe we can do some other smart matching to show the causality. So the first thing when you really start this project, what we do is we try to replicate the patterns using diverse database. So we look at the APS data set and a subset of scientists. The distribution of pivoting angle is like in that subset of APS is like highly conservative. So most of them don't. This will be different when you look at larger database in when you have a sparser matrix. But the patterns of pivoting penalty basically holds. I try a lot of way. I look at fixed effect, I control for fields, but the rough story is pivoting angle is a very, very robust pattern. And you can change your measures. You can use citation, or you can say hit rates. How likely I publish a paper at the top 5 percentile. It's like, it's just this pattern is very robust. And so we kind of bittersweet because we replicate the pattern. So it looks like this is a topic that was really there. This is a problem that's really there. But the conclusion, I don't quite like it, but that's it. So let's face it. So then we move into a larger database, which I am more familiar. I basically looking at how scientists perform in the biomedical areas. And we start from a particular year, 2010s. For convenience, because the database is large, we need to first figure out the prototype of codes in order to move forward. My current result is only based on that single year, so it's not guaranteed to always that way. But here's a distribution of pivoting angle. This is very similar to what in the original pivoting angle papers. And here's the result. Again, you see the very, very similar patterns that you have the pivoting penalty. And p-value is extremely significant. I use the shorthand 2.2 e minus 16. That's basically a hand waving way of saying extremely significant, but the p-value is much smaller than that. But there's a couple of interesting things that when we plot the figures. So first of all, there's actually it looks like there are some angles that are actually good. So it's around 0.3 when the cosine distance. So the slight pivot looks like good, but the patterns afterwards is just decline. And this is the median pivoting angle. You look at the position of median pivoting angle. Sorry, questions?
Yeah, I think we lost you for a little bit. The last 5 seconds.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I already introduced the distribution of pivoting angle, right?
Yes, and you were explaining.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so when we plot the pivoting angle, first we do replicate the patterns in a different database. This time is the MAG and a much larger database and biomedical scientists with more coverage of journals. But there's a couple of things that I would like to emphasize that was not emphasized in our journal publication. Is like it looks like, first of all, the pivoting penalty is not completely monotonic. So there's optimal levels where you do get an impact and then decline subsequently. The second point is like, if you look at the overall pattern, most of the publication seems like over pivot. So pivot too far away from that. So maybe part of the reason is you're pivoting too far away. But secondly, we can also say there's a demand of scientists switching the topics. And we would like to say how you can satisfy the demand. If you are saying that curiosity is part of your incentive for doing science, and we want to flatten the curve. We don't want you to get hurt, but you can still achieve the switching the topics. So that kind of nicely align with our original goals. So that's the take-home message from a more detailed look just at the single pictures that appear here. So the first thing that we're looking at is like we have the data at hand. Is basically we can calculate. So biomedical is a very large terms, and then there's still subfield there. And then we are kind of curious, if you pivot, is it good to do that in a larger field or pivoting to a larger field, or is it good to pivoting to somewhat smaller field? And so we do a simple regressions. We don't have control the other star, which we might later do that. And I'm happy to take into questions. We basically look at the single most simple characteristic of field is how large it is. And we do a regressions, which is a Poisson model, because we are dealing with count data, citation count data. And then we ask, and the most interesting thing is we want to look at the interaction term between the field size versus pivot score while controlling the May effect. And this is the interesting pattern. It looks like as the field size increase, the pivoting penalty will be larger. So it looks like if you pivot, don't pivot into large fields. At the beginning, I used don't pivot into hard fields, but then Alex, one of our co-authors, says large does not mean hard. We might need to measure something like grow in order to do that. And I think, okay, so that's the current tentative observations. This result might not be robust. We need to do a lot of the other checks, but that's a start. And so the next step is like, can we zoom in deeper to look at the detailed field characteristics? And this, in order to treat this, we do an enrichment analysis, which is very common in biomedical research. The Galton analysis, you have the notation of individual paper, and then you separate them into two groups and do an enrichment analysis, see which type of topics the match terms are enriched in what type of are enriched in high pivoting paper but successful versus high pivoting paper that are failed. They have below median impact, although they pivot more than hard. We do exclude some general terms which you always see when you do enrichment analysis for high impact paper versus low impact paper. The tentative result is like we don't see any enriched topics, but there's a bunch of depleted topics. So maybe we could say nothing is particularly good, but there are something that are particularly bad. I can't see a coherent pattern by just looking at the terms at the moment, because it's like not quite coherent, and we are trying to debug to see what we can do further. So to summarize, we basically figure out the first thing I don't discuss in detail in this presentation, but I think that's the most important thing when you have remote collaboration, and how did you keep things going. We actually schedule meeting every month, and we try to just keep things work. And there are some skills that if you want to start this type of project, and I'm happy to talk about that in the Q&A. And we also figure out almost all the prototype calculation for the project involving how to properly calculate the pivoting scores and what type of data we can brought into, and several other pilots that are still ongoing to do some more robust analysis of that. So I hope this presentation I make the presentation clear, and happy to take Q&A. Before starting the Q&A, I want to make some acknowledgement and kind of advertisement. So this package developed by Alex and his friends. He's saying I use this package and I also modify some of the codes in order to make project work. So it's really useful. And Alex asked me to make an advertisement for that, so I come here. And he said the paper is coming anyway. And certainly I would like to acknowledge two of the collaborators and the Science of Science Summer School funding for $2,000, and I'm happy to take questions to this presentations. Thank you.
I had a question, if I may.
Okay, cool.
Hi, my name is Eric Shares. So thanks for your talk. I'm just interested to know if there's any way, and this might not even be possible, is there a way to tell why the person pivoted? So maybe they are intellectually curious, as your beginning example, and they want to go off and contribute to multiple fields, but maybe also they weren't as successful as they wanted to be, or something else happened. Is there any way to control for maybe the reason that the pivot happened?
That is also things that I want to get to. So one thing that we observe in this thing is like, usually the median pivoting angle is always like higher than it should be in turn if you are just maximizing an impact. And previous were also saying the scientists just increasing the frequency or switching the topics. So I am also very curious about why that happens. There might be some, so there are a lot of possibility that this could happen if you survey people. I mean, I don't have to do a formal survey, but every time I ask the other people, they usually give different type of answers. Some answers are really, I am curious about it, as I say, the curiosity part of driving. And some of them are just like following the crowd. The other people do that. So there might be some peer effect there. And I was also curious about that. And maybe, so I think some of the pivoting is certainly we should encourage it, but some of the pivoting might not really be good. Like you don't need that much paper on COVID to some extent. I suspect the fraction that was useful is not that much. And the people have a very clear intention of why they pivoting to COVID. I don't even need to ask. Not always just I want to do things good for the society. Maybe it's just, oh, this is a hot topic, I'm going to get impact. So I would love to see what type of data we can couple to look
simply maybe I misunderstood, but simply publishing one or two papers on, say, COVID, but then reverting back toward your maybe home discipline, would that count as a pivot, or maybe kind of just a digression?
So the pivoting is actually paper to paper.
Okay.
So they are like, you have a focal paper is always relative to your expertise.
I see.
So it's like they can. So the follow-on behavior could also be very interesting. Do they just like, if I try and I don't get what I get, will I just go back to my original field, or I consistent to move? And what type of scientists have a higher tolerance for initial setback, for instance? If we can't totally alleviate, maybe there's expertise was just like, I can't do that. Yeah. So
hi, Meng.
Okay.
Thank you for your interesting presentation. I think you know me, and my name is Han. So
yeah.
I have one question: is that if you take a look at researchers in Science of Science, you will see so many researchers that come from a different field. For example, Dashun Wang, he studied physics, and now he's doing computational social science. Do you consider this is pivoting, and do you think that why this kind of switch like still help him publish well? And do you think is any strategy behind it, or some kind of switch is fine, or he was pivoting early so that he can afford the pain at the beginning and then he can get a reward?
So that question would, so if you focus on science of science, I would say most of people, when they do science of science, they don't shift their intellectual content. So when you look at a journal that they cite, they basically was saying, I'm looking at different set of things and I try to learn something and venturing into different things. So I'm not so sure that he's really pivoting. So if you look at the research that he was doing, many of the things was what he has done in the past, like universality and complex systems, some modeling skills on that. So this actually very subtle when you look at the citation versus when you look at audience. Maybe I bring my old technologies, but then applied it to a new problems, and I don't have to shift too much award. And this might be particularly salient in the field of science because it's just so large a field. It's so heterogeneous. It is not necessarily that large, but you can put a lot of things under that umbrella. Innovation economists are part of that, and then traditional biomedical scientists, probably some of them are also doing that, and certainly scientometrics, but they are, even when they use the term science of science and you look at their paper, they are not really doing cohering things. So I don't even know if you should call science of science a field.
Okay, I see. So you think he is not pivoting, is not a big change?
Part of his work is also pivoting. So when he go to Northwestern, if you look at his research, he certainly pick up some of the skills in the econometrics. It's just like maybe the right mix or the right tempo and pace is important.
Okay.
But I do agree that there will be a very complex discussion about what should be called a pivot.
Okay, thank you.
Questions?
Sarah, go ahead.
Sarah.
Thanks. Yeah, this is so fascinating. So I guess along those lines of what is a pivot, I was also wondering about the stability of the concept of a field and whether or not you're able to detect or pick up on shifts or pivots to like emerging or transdisciplinary research areas. I think that would be a challenge for this work.
Yeah. So that was a good questions, and we can take into consideration to see whether or not it's similar to transdisciplinary work. And the way that we use, the process that we use is journal distributions, which is kind of convenience. In my mind, a better measure for that, maybe you should embed your papers into an embedding and you get a metric space that was more accurately measuring the intellectual precision was what you previously it is. And also quite slightly different from transdisciplinarities, like pivoting is very straightforward continuous measures. So there's nothing that was not totally switching field. You're not going to do exactly the same thing as your next papers versus your current papers. It's just a matter of degree that might be also slightly different from transdisciplinarities.
So I have a question, if I may ask.
Okay, cool.
Thank you for your talk. So there is this paper that I forget who was the author that shows that there is a penalty for innovation. So do you think, because I guess when you pivot, but that paper showed that, when you do more innovative work, you pay a penalty citation, but then in the long run, you do better. So have you thought about looking at pivoting, but then like at the long-term effects of that, maybe in the long run, you will do better or you will recover?
That was a good question, but how long is long run? So in this study, when we look at a pivoting penalty, the calculation we use is C10, so at least 10 years. And in the normal analysis, you usually call that long run already, but it could possibly be there somewhere that's like silence for 30
Okay, but
years.
is that the citation of that paper, right?
Yeah.
So I'm wondering about the citation of the scientist, right? That is pivoting. I know that it's difficult
Okay,
because
okay.
probably a team.
There are some suggestive evidence, I think, is from Journal of Informatics by Tao Jia from South China University. They basically saying if you're looking at the career begin and career end, it looks like the distance is larger than the impact is higher. So for the scientists itself, it might be good at the proper time you switch your topics and maybe bear some initial cost and then you can recover after a certain time.
Right.
That was a good point. So we also have to distinguish like from should we tracking the people or should we tracking the papers? Now at the current snapshot, we look at individual papers and see their contribution. But maybe for scientists, it's good to pivot. And after you learn something, you do indeed build your own view. Maybe the pivoting penalty is also true for Simon Benson.
Yeah.
I think he don't have publication for a long time before he get a Claude Newtons or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, I pivoted a lot, and I think I pay a penalty. I blame that for my low citation count sometimes. But I hope to learn from this nice field. Any other question? So in your analysis, I have another question. You have one of the regressions you run is with field size. How do you determine field size? And
it is straightforward. It's just counting
counting
in my corpus. In 2010, how many paper was in that field, in that subfield, and we use a MAG.
Nice.
MAG. Yeah. But I'm sure that we got to look more careful about this type of measures. And again,
yeah, because I think you have multiple fields per paper or something, or do you have one?
So then that paper will contribute to the field count of multiple different fields as the first approximation. I would be wondering maybe we should, again, if a scientist, no matter what type of entity you look at, a scientist will have multiple fields, either in that categories. But
also, it will be interesting to see, like, someone maybe is in a big field and they'd like to switch into a new field. So maybe you can have like the field that they're coming from, the field that they're going to put it.
So the two most fundamental question is, where do I come from and where should I go? I agree on that, but I don't not yet have, but certainly we can do that. I don't yet have time to collect the where does that scientist come from. We just look at and for the corpus that we focus on, we have very straightforward field annotation, but not the offers. That was also a good question. There might be some field that when pivoting is much easier than the others, and maybe that's cultural norm and solve different. I see Stephen have questions.
Hi. Yeah, thanks, and congratulations on getting this project moved ahead so much. It's very interesting, and I guess that often when people talk about this, you can call it pivoting, you can call it kind of expanding your research. I guess one idea is that you want to you choose a field where you can actually bring in your special talents, and I guess, and do you feel like that there's a way to capture that in sort of a quantitative metric, that sort of what the person is bringing in when they move to a new field?
So that was also a constant question that I was thinking about, because in these cases, we are looking at the reference. This is saying the intellectual base of particular papers. And then if you do change your fields, but your reference are based on your own field skills, then we might not be picking that up in the pivoting angles here. And I think that's the important distinctions and we need to make. And there may be other ways that we can do that, like if I looking at the whether or not this paper belong to a different field, but their citation always come from his old fields, for instance. But then how did you categorize this paper come from a different field? By the paper citing this paper, then you have solved some endogenous problems that is very hard to deal with. But we do think about this problem a lot. Basically, it's the same idea of transdisciplinary research.
Right, right.
Maybe-
So you can imagine there are many different ways to characterize the sort of the nature of the shift or the pivot, right? And yeah, it seems like a very rich area to explore. Because,
Yeah. The nice thing is like at the current, at least the basic tenet is pivoting penalty do exist, no matter how you measure it. So we see that from different type of work, and I also try different way of calculating that. But we do think a lot about how did you categorize if someone that was not really change his skills, but venture into new problems. And I have not yet have a very clear idea how should we, what kind of signal we can look at without sort of drawing the conclusion after the fact.
Yeah, I mean, so it's sort of a semantic analysis could help there too, right? If you could somehow draw a link between their work and their old work.
Right.
I mean, that adds a whole new dimension to things, but it could be very interesting.
Right. And to some extent, we also don't decompose the pivoting penalties too well, because citation is basically the perceptions. So they might really doing some original work, but it's just not upset by the new field. So this can be just larger field have a larger barrier for you to enter. It doesn't mean you do lower quality work. So these are also very sort of like convoluted things to decompose. And it will be interesting to figure that out. So I think there's one thing that I also want to say about is like when the first time you look at the paper, the original claim is like, then we should not pivot. But that might not be the right answers, because it might be the system is not right, not that the pivoting is bad.
Yeah, well, I can definitely say from experience that newcomers are always viewed with a little bit of skepticism in established fields. There's a sense that, you know, why are they here, right? Are they here to sort of take over our territory, or are they, you know, are they actually bringing in useful ideas? And I think people do tend to be a little bit xenophobic.
Yeah, I do see that a lot, and I don't know, because some of there's also a possibility that the newcomers sometimes produces not quite make sense. That happens, but then it's really hard to tell between the true gen versus the garbage.
Right. There's I recently observed a thread on Twitter about, what is it? Economists come into fields and you know, basically publish economists' explanations for results that have been published, you know, years ago by other people in the field, and they don't cite the work, and they basically say, oh, here we just discovered this new phenomenon that everyone knows has been around for 10 years already. But yeah, so there's definitely a danger of you know, overstepping a little bit.
Yeah. So there's always this type of the problems that we need to look at the whether or not the respect. So I don't know, should you cross the boundary or should you respect the boundary at different type of contexts? But that's very interesting and intriguing topics. And I think it's like, as scientists in the science of science field, we are born to solve this type of problems. Yeah.
Are there any final questions? Okay, well, let's thank the speaker, Mengyi. Thank you so much for your presentation. I'm very happy to see this progress, and I'm excited that there is a paper in the works from what I see in one of the slides. So congratulations.
That paper is Alex's paper, not ours at the moment. So we just use this package and I make it.
Oh, okay.
And I have to say a little bit so apologize, because I look at 1 to 2 p.m. and I forget that's Eastern time.
Oh yeah. No worries. I mean,
Sorry
mountain time, and nobody uses mountain time except a couple of states.
Okay.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, and congratulations again. And
Thank you.
yeah, Excellent work.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.